Hey, everybody, welcome back to Front Page Fitness. I am Eric Trexler here with the Dr. Lauren Colenso Semple. We are here with episode number 9, I believe. Lauren, how are we doing tonight?
We are doing well. Is the pink top acceptable? Do you prefer it to the black?
Yeah. Yeah, I like, pink, pastels, anything kind of Eastery, I think is very lovely for the show. So I, of course, went with my typical gym wear type attire, which is kind of an everyday thing for me now. So I'm doing the old sweatsuit. I wish I had matching pants because obviously that kicks it up a notch. But for now, just the this I got from Innovate Elite Performance, which is a company that hasn't existed since 2015, but it's a classic.
Do you remember when everyone used to wear, I think it was Adidas, with like the white stripe down the side with the matching zip up?
Yes, absolutely. Tracksuits are just tremendous. It really should be compulsory attire for, especially for men above a certain age. I feel like that's like peak I've made it is when you're like, you know what, I'm gonna wear this matching tracksuit for the rest of my life and be permanently comfortable.
Or you're a rapper?
Or you're a rapper, yes. But Lauren, we have important business to get down to. Um,
We do.
Recently, we've had kind of a theme on the show, which is that nobody likes Lauren. And not only that, I think that undersells it. Nobody likes Lauren, and everyone likes to dislike Lauren on the internet. Um,
Okay.
but now it looks like I have gotten some heat, and this is news to me. So what I see in the outline is a prompt for me to defend myself about spraying butter on popcorn. It seems like a straightforward thing. Butter's nice. Popcorn makes you live to 100. So what am I defending here?
Well, one of our esteemed listeners left the following comment. Aerosol spray butter on popcorn warrants a 0-star rating. This is very upsetting. Dr. Lauren, how can you sit idly by while these assertions go unchecked? Front Page Fitness credibility is being threatened by Dr. Trexler's horrifying claims. One food practice does deserve to be demonized. This one.
Wow. Well, I feel like aerosol, turning a stick of butter into an aerosolized spray when it specifically comes down to popcorn applications is a beautiful thing. When you're trying to butter some popcorn, there's kind of a spectrum of ways to do it. One is to literally take a pat of butter, which is a technical term I've come to learn, a pat of butter, and just kind of put it in there and I don't know, shake it around and hope it melts and distributes in a reasonable way. That's ridiculous.
Okay.
Number two is, if you go to the movie theater, they're going to have the pump thing where they're just pumping liquid and kind of moving it around. That's fine. If you're at home, maybe you get a microwave safe container, melt the butter and drizzle it over. But the coverage is so uneven. It's so localized in the dribbling process as you dribble it over your corn. You want that aerosol action. You want to spread that out as widely as possible with even distribution. And so it's really a beautiful thing. So I feel like I don't even have to defend myself because it seems just inherently defensible and frankly, like technically correct.
Hmm. Is this actual butter or is it one of the I can't
No,
believe it's not varieties?
no, it's some kind of amalgamation of,
A vegetable oil
vegetable
situation.
oils that have been assembled in a large factory. Could be petroleum based for all I know. But it
It's a
tastes like
butter-like
butter.
substance.
It tastes like butter and it has a suitable amount of coloring to make it appear as if it were butter on the popcorn. So the look is right, the flavor is right. Everything else I can look past.
I feel like if you were Florida Man cholesterol hands, you would actually melt several sticks of butter prior to the popcorn making and then add the popcorn to the butter such that there was so much melted butter in the primary container that it would be very evenly coated.
So you got to be careful there too, because then your popcorn can get soggy.
Mm.
And that's a big issue with the uneven distribution. If you're just pouring it over, if you pour it directly on a kernel and let it sit there and you're not, shaking it around, that kernel that takes a huge direct hit of the butter is going to get soggy. So, nothing is worse than soggy popcorn. So, I would encourage people who are hating on the spray butter to reconsider that and give it a shot.
All right. Well, we'll see what the listeners have to say.
All right. So, Lauren, let's move on here. We've got something called Instagram Moron Awards. Is that a phrase that you're coining, or is that like a recognized thing?
No, that's just what I'm calling it.
Okay.
And so both of these actually happened today. And of course, I see a lot of tomfoolery on the socials. Instagram is the main platform in which I participate. But the gold medal goes to an individual who is putting out information. He has a quite large following, mind you, that due to the radiation involved, mammograms cause cancer and therefore women should skip them. Highly, highly problematic. Have you heard it? Have you heard this at all?
Uh, I have not heard this. The guy talking there is not David Avocado Wolf, is he? The person talking in the video here?
He is not. He is sharing an extremely old interview.
Because I was going to say, I was like, I had a mental image from like 10 years ago about what Dr. Avocado, I'll call him.
Right.
I don't think he's a doctor, and Avocado is not his real name, but David Avocado Wolf. I had a mental image of what he looked like, and I was like, this cannot be that man unless the last 10 years have been obscenely just really hard on him. So this is a fundamentally different man.
Yes.
But no, I have not heard this. Obviously, you and I do not hang out in precisely the same corners of the internet. But this is a new one. I think the Moron Awards is probably the right category for this. I will file it away as a new surprising thing that is both dumb and dangerous, which there are kind of a few floating around these days. So yeah, I got to give it to you. This is good in the most terrible way when it comes to Moron Awards. Yeah, and the thing about radiation is it's kind of everywhere all the time, and there are many things that we interact with that give us small doses of radiation. And so you can't just say like radiation is involved, therefore it will give you cancer, because that's just not how dosage works. So yeah, just 0 stars, bad all around, don't like it, kind of hate it, wish you didn't tell me about it, but now I'm aware that more bad information exists than I thought.
Yes. So for context, these doses that you're getting of radiation when you get a mammogram or you get a CT scan, or even when you get an x-ray at the dentist, things like this. As you said, we're exposed to radiation all the time. And, this kind of quote unquote background radiation varies depending on where you live and the activities that you're engaged in. And obviously, there are certain professions that are perhaps at a higher risk than others. But generally speaking, if you're going for an outdoor walk every day, that's some radiation exposure. And mammograms are the only approved assessment to detect breast cancer. And so the idea that anyone is presenting this sort of information to encourage women to avoid them is highly, highly problematic. You're a moron. You should be canceled immediately.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, yeah, even just, going on a flight is actually a fairly substantial radiation dose. So yeah, so much misinformation, so little time. Speaking of misinformation, Lauren, what is number 2 here on the Moron Awards?
So number 2,
This is someone clapping back at you, isn't it?
yes. So a colleague, I won't call her a colleague, an influencer online by the name of Stacey Sims recently posted a reel discussing this groundbreaking study in which 2 groups were consuming different protein intakes. And there was no exercise involved. There was no calorie deficit involved. And the high protein group went from 35% body fat to 20% body fat in 12 weeks. I mean, whoa. If I mean, I was shocked. I hadn't heard about this. There was no headlines. Why aren't I familiar with this study? So I looked up the study. Turns out this study does exist. 12 weeks, higher protein, lower protein. The higher protein intake group went from 33.2% body fat on average to 31.8 body fat percentage on average. So we can agree blatant misinformation here, does not accurately represent the study, making a very bold claim about, body composition changes that can be realized in the absence of a calorie deficit, in the absence of any sort of exercise or physical activity intervention. And she also made the claim that these changes were due to shifts in muscle protein synthesis, which the study did not measure. I had some comments. I had some questions. And so I said, hey, I looked at the study. This is what the data actually said. And many of her fans and followers had some less than kind things to say to me, interestingly, because the data is the data. Here's the link. Look at table 3, right?
I have to correct you, Lauren. The data are the data.
Sorry, excuse me.
I forgive you, but I will take that to the grave and die on that hill every time.
The data are the data. Table 3.
I agree.
And the most interesting comment that I received was the following. Maybe she was given the wrong information to read off of. 2% versus 20%. Someone put a 0 there. Why jump to a conclusion that points a finger at her intentionally pointing out misinformation? That speaks more to where your brain goes than what the actual cause was. You don't know. You aren't there. You're making assumptions. It's not that big a deal. So what? Women may not drop to 20%, but they will see a drop by increasing their protein. Moron Award.
Yeah, that's okay, Lauren. I can't I have so much respect for you wading into these waters and dealing with the arrows coming at you, because this is a fundamentally stupid thing. So let me take this back a little bit. So she said they went from 35 to 20?
Correct.
So there are no numbers to be jumbled there. Like you have two-digit numbers with 4 completely different integers making up those numbers, right? So it's not like, oh, I've inverted this one and that one. It's like you didn't confuse. It's not like if someone said 12 instead of 21 and kind of like inverted the two numbers. They didn't go to 2% body fat, so clearly they went to 20. Like I don't know how you mix up that number. So yeah, 35 to 20 is let's see, a 15% or a drop of 15 percentage points. When in reality it was what, 0.4?
33.2 to 31.8, so 1.4.
1.4, okay. So yeah, that's a big difference.
Big. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very big. And I think one of the things that is really concerning is one of the things that just jumps out to me is if a person says a thing that as it's coming out of their mouth, they don't immediately say, wait a minute, I'm saying a stupid thing. To me, that is a very jarring thing to witness, because it's like you're using words and numbers and they're not registering in your brain. You know what I mean? Like, it's like it's like you're speaking a language that you don't actually know. You just put it in like Google Translate and you're like, this is what phonetically it looks like. There's no way you can let that come out of your mouth and know what you're talking about. To say they just ate more protein and went from 35% body fat to 20%.
I'll also add that there were graphics sort of spliced into the reel where it literally shows cartoon characters, 35% before, 20% after. So it isn't like, oh yeah, I just misspoke. No, and the whole point of the whole point she was making was, this is amazing. Dietary protein, even in the absence of anything else, can make these massive changes in body composition. You don't make that claim when it was a really negligible change.
Yeah. So did she respond by any chance?
She did not.
Oh, well, damn it. So close to
Shut.
getting some serious hard-hitting scientific debate. Yeah, that's I I don't know what's going on over there, Lauren, this world that you've entered. It seems like every time someone references a study, it's like either retracted because it's clearly fake or or someone's like, okay, they lost half of their body fat. Actually, they lost like a very small, almost undetectable amount of body fat, but still, like, that's basically the same thing.
It's basically half.
And I don't understand also, like, well, I do understand it, but I lament the fact that, like, the people who are consuming this content, it's like, what are you there for? Because, like, if a person corrects it, I wouldn't even file that under like infotainment. It's just informative content, right? There's nothing entertaining about learning, like hearing someone talk about a study about protein intake. So it's like, it doesn't even fall under the umbrella of infotainment. It's just like, I'm here to learn a thing. And then someone says, actually, the thing you're learning right now in this very moment is fundamentally not true. And they're like, I was going to say a word I don't want to say on air. They're like, screw you, Lauren. Why are you ruining this for us when we're just trying to sit here and listen to fake information that isn't really enjoyable or entertaining? I just want to be told a fairy tale about protein. Like, I just fundamentally don't understand that perspective of saying, I'm here for the information, but if you correct the person because they're telling me things that are blatantly false, I'm going to not like you for that. Very, very strange world that you've entered.
Right. And somehow, I'm misleading people by sharing the data that is actually in the paper that was referenced.
Yeah.
Riddle me that one.
I just don't understand this because I've been talking on podcasts more than anyone asked for and more than anyone wanted for many years. I think I tabulated, I've probably been on like 400 hours worth of podcasts over the last several years. I know I have enough good sense if I'm like, you know what, I should have prepared more on this paper or that paper. I don't really know the exact numbers in this paper. You don't have to commit. You can back up and say like, yeah, like in this paper, I don't remember the exact numbers, but there was some modest fat loss and it was just from increasing protein. Like that alone is a good morsel of information that is useful and actionable. I just don't understand the need to like look straight in the camera and say, these people lost 170 pounds from increasing their protein intake over 6 weeks. And if you don't believe me, never click on the PubMed link. Like, I just don't understand why people think that they're going to like slide this one by if you cite the exact study and say blatantly wrong things about it. I don't get it.
Nor do I. And when she stops lying, I'll stop calling her out.
To be fair, we have to be fair. We have to be charitable when she stops saying things that aren't true.
Right.
Okay. Meet me halfway here. Okay. It's the right thing to do, Lauren, to be charitable and say, this is a person who says a lot of things very often that are not true.
Mm-hmm.
But once you use the L word, now you're talking about intent and motive and things like that. So that's coming from me, a person who's written a lot of nasty letters to the editor lately, where I can't just like go out and say like, hey, you have fabricated data in a fraudulent manner. I just have to say, whatever the hell happened here is an abomination and will never, ever happen again on planet Earth. Explain yourself, please. So I'm getting good at that diplomatic language that is very, very precise and won't get me sued into oblivion.
Right. And since you're always checking what was the legal website with the tacos?
Oh, that was many, many different websites. Oh, I think that was a university. I forget which one though.
Right. So
yeah, I think Syracuse. Yeah, Syracuse law. Yeah, they do really good case law in the food and restaurant. You got to know which universities specialize in what.
Absolutely.
Lauren, can I add something to the Moron Awards? This is
go for it.
off the
Yeah.
cuff. So in the mass group, I already shared this, but there's a new wrinkle. I'm not going to bore everyone. I've mentioned it on the show before. There's a paper where people who have this pet theory about lean folks on ketogenic diets, they're like, oh, I'm sure they're fine. They're probably not going to get heart disease, even though their LDL's at like 300. So they published a paper. It was chaotic from start to finish, but now that there's been all this chaos and people have actually like twisted their arm and gotten them to report the data, um, which is a really big part of doing research, Lauren, is reporting your primary outcome. It turns out that these people who they expected to have very minimal plaque progression in terms of like the plaque in their arteries that would lead to heart disease down the line, they actually had extremely rapid plaque progression. But here's where it gets funny, and this is why it counts under the Moron Awards, is two authors on this paper. There are multiple authors. One of them is like actually he's like, so they use this thing called a Clearly scan, which is like an AI tool to kind of analyze these arterial scans to look at how much plaque is there. So that's what they used in the study. And one author is like in a bunch of promotional content for this company, Clearly, or whoever owns this technology, saying like, this is a game changer. It's remarkably accurate. It's incredible. It's going to revolutionize medicine, blah, blah, blah. And the other author is now out at presentations kind of defending his pet theory, saying, not only did we not see slow progression, but the progression is so fast that I'm going to say it's implausible. And I am now very skeptical of these Clearly scans. So you have these two different authors. One of them is like kind of like shilling the scan itself as like a breakthrough revolutionary technology. The other one's saying like, no, I really like ketogenic diets and I don't want to believe I'm essentially contributing to my early death. So I'm going to throw those scans under the bus and say that I don't believe our own data because the plaque progression is so alarmingly rapid. So Moron Awards all around to the folks who published that paper. It is it just gotten worse and worse and worse over time, and I think there's no bottom to the debate surrounding that paper.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough, man. I would say this to all the kids out there who hopefully don't listen to this show. If you want to get into research, you got to be really comfortable with just bailing on your ideas. Because if you're going to take your ideas to the grave, you're going to find yourself in some pretty intractable situations where, for example, you and your co-author have fundamentally incompatible interpretations of your own
Or
study.
your own paper.
Yeah. So yeah, you might want to like have a little more intellectual flexibility if you want to get into the research game. All right, Lauren. How many crunches can you do?
I couldn't even tell you the last time I did crunches. How about you?
Um, a normal crunch like gym class presidential test. I a same thing. I couldn't tell you. I do like to do some weighted crunches, kind of in the 8 to 12 rep range on the decline bench. But apparently, Lauren, you came across an article in the New York Post, uh, opining on
Steamed publication.
absolutely opining on in your backyard there, New York, your old stomping grounds,
That's right.
how many crunches you should be able to do at every age using the football field test for motivation. So first and foremost, what is the football field test?
Well, let's talk about the reason why they say that you should be able to do a crunch at all. And this is because if you are in a situation where, you're lying on the ground and, you're basically incapacitated and you need to get up, that, your crunch game is what matters for your health, for your physical function. It's not about having abs. This is about really being a functional person. And they go into a lot of decade-specific recommendations. They also point out that if you have difficulty performing crunches, you probably have back issues, joint pain, cardiovascular problems. So, crunches are apparently really, really fundamental. And you should be able to do 40 to 50 in your 20s, 30 to 40 in your 30s, 20 to 30 in your 40s, because your metabolism might slow, but your determination doesn't have to.
I hate everything about that. We go on.
15 to 25 in your 50s, 10 to 20 in your 60s, because you're a legend and your core should reflect that. The focus here is on maintaining mobility and strength to support an active lifestyle. Crunches totally contribute to maintaining mobility and strength to support an active lifestyle. And, you know, your abs won't be popping if you're putting...
So here's... Can I go?
Yeah.
Are you done with this? I'm sorry. I have to interject. And listen, I get it. I get the game. I get the business. But who told them that they needed to write this article? Like who is this for? And what objective did they feel that this was meeting? Because this is just wild. It's like, sometimes there's articles I just don't understand the context of, like, how did we get here? You have to lay your eyes on this article. It's like every paragraph is basically like 2 sentences, and it's like, in your 30s, David said you should do this many, and here's a quote he made about just being in your 30s. You know, and every single one of them is like that. It's like,
but I didn't answer your question about the football field.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
using the football field test for motivation, imagine this: you've fallen flat in the field, an entire football team is barreling toward you, and no one's around to lend a hand. Could you get back on your feet? If the answer is no, it's time to start adding crunches.
Okay, now I really have to pop off, because that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. So,
4th Moron Award, New York Post and Joseph, whatever his name is. David.
So, okay, like, first of all, there are not young people whose lack of crunching ability is impacting their ability to get up off the floor. Bringing your shoulders closer to your pelvis is not like the key limiting factor of getting up off the floor.
Unless you don't have hands and arms.
Yeah, this is just not how people get up. So that's my first issue. My second issue is, like, this clearly has kind of like a lifespan element of, like, well, you want to make sure you're maintaining it as you get older. The idea of inserting this very strange football field analogy of, like, for some reason 11 people want to harm you and you're on a football field, like, that doesn't make
on your
sense. There's no context for it. How did you get there? Why did you fall? Why do they all want to harm you? But, like, there is an actual true thing that is, like, if you want to strike fear in somebody's heart, and I'm sorry, this is going to be kind of morbid, but, like, if that is the goal of this football field analogy or metaphor or whatever, how about this? You're alone in your home. You're 80 years old. You sat down on the toilet, and now you can't get up, and you need to call for help. That's the most terrifying and saddest thing I've ever heard. Like, that is a thing that genuinely makes me worry about, like, staying active and maintaining my mobility as I age. And that's a real thing. Like, getting old, like, there are like actual activities of daily living that it's like, you really need to make sure you're taking care of yourself so that you can maintain this independence and maintain your quality of life. The idea of reaching for this strange thing where 11 people want to harm you on a football field is, like, it's not plausible at all. And frankly, it's less motivating to actually address the thing that's being talked about here. Like, there are very real and, like, very worrisome struggles of getting older and reasons to maintain your strength and mobility. So Lauren, I have to give it 0 stars, 0 thumbs up, maybe 2 thumbs down. And I just wish that there was, like, one more person at every publication who, before it goes out and gets posted, they had to, like, complete a rubric. And there's basically, like, a couple boxes. Number 1, who is this for and why are we doing it? And if you can't answer those 2 questions really well, I think you put it on the shelf, Lauren.
Have you seen the SNL skit about the toilet death ejector?
No.
So the premise is basically, if you're on the toilet and you feel yourself dying, then simply press the button and it will eject you from the toilet onto your bed and then a thoughtful book like the Bible will drop onto your chest, and so your family will
More
find you dead
dignified.
on your bed reading the Bible, as opposed to dead on the toilet, which is really undignified.
Yeah, there's so much terror of our morbid reality of aging that you could tap into, but instead we're going for, you know what? I'll extend a little olive branch here. Maybe our good friend David here, the expert interviewed in the article, maybe he knows that that's just simply too heavy, and so you know what? Let's contrive a silly little metaphor rather than tapping into the true morbidity of challenges we all will face in our later years. So perhaps he's just trying to water it down and keep it fun for the old New York Post. Maybe.
I think he just wanted a shirtless photo of himself in the New York Post.
I believe that to be true. These photos do not look, they look like they've been very professionally done with a great deal of purpose. And you know what? Great physique. Happy for David in that regard. But yeah,
Joseph.
this is, what's that?
Joseph.
Oh yeah, that's his last name, right?
Yes.
Oh no, Joseph David. Sorry, they've been referring to him as David, the esteemed Mr. David in the article here. But yeah, so I don't know. I see an article like this and I'm just kind of like, it's just floating out in the sea of fitness stuff of just like completely arbitrary heuristics and arbitrary measurements and markers. So remind me though one more time. Let me see here. Once you're 60 and up, 10 to 20 crunches. So do with that.
It'll save your life.
Yeah. Do with that information what you will. And that what a just absolute shot across the bow at all the people who study you know, aging and physical activity. All these people using these chair stand tests, stupid crap like that. You know, how many times can you safely get up and down out of a chair? How far can you walk in 6 minutes? Different balance tests, all stupid. That you
Useless.
just be doing the old presidential test and really just trimming it down to the crunches portion, and that'll tell you what you need.
And hopefully you have a football field and team to, really test the limits of your motivation.
Absolutely, yeah. And I'm Lauren. I'm contractually obligated. Your metabolism doesn't slow down at 40. So I must say that since it was brought up.
Yes.
But yeah, the thing I want to leave our dear listeners with is you're going to find a lot of this, even in the published literature, of people saying like, what if we found one arbitrary strength heuristic to use as a general indicator of your physical capability? And like, you're going to see a lot of stuff on like, no one in the scientific world is using crunches, but you do see a lot of stuff where it's like, they'll use hand grip strength because it's very easy to measure. And broadly speaking, in a population of 10,000 people, people who are very unwell and becoming quite frail are going to have weak grip strength, and people who are very robust and of good health will have stronger grip strength. That's fine to use it as like a general marker of like how you doing lately, but the issue is when people start to say like, oh, grip strength correlated with living longer, therefore I need to have the strongest vice grip possible. And it's like, no,
Yeah.
completely misapplying it. So all these like age related heuristics, pretty much throw them out the window. Not interested.
Totally agree. I know there are some longevity experts, quote unquote, who will say you should be actively training your grip strength. And it's purely because they're not understanding that, hey, just because we measured that in these large populations of 80-year-olds, that was out of convenience. They don't know how to do a 1RM squat. So like,
That is like a really good point though, Lauren, is like if you're following someone and they are of the opinion that specifically training your grip to be as strong as possible is like a longevity hack, like I should say this nicely. They fundamentally don't understand what they're reading. I'm not going to say that they're up for the Moron Awards. That's your thing, Lauren. That's very mean-spirited. I kind of dislike that you brought that into the show.
sorry.
But
Sorry.
it is like a huge indicator. Like I have no idea what I'm reading and I can only take it literally, the words on the page. I can't actually interpret it for any kind of meaning beneath that, which is probably not where you want to get the lion's share of your information, Lauren.
Yeah, I mean, I think this actually translates nicely into our segment about this podcast that we watched to varying degrees.
Yeah.
But I say that because there are a lot of examples of people who have MDs who then go on to talk about exercise or talk about nutrition, and they don't have the training nor the research experience to have that context, which you and I clearly have. It's not a secret. It's pretty damn obvious if you ask me. But these are the people who are going to be promoting these types of activities and then calling it evidence-based. And I see this time and time again. We've talked about Dr. Lee and the apples and the chlorogenic acid. We've talked about these longevity hacks. We've talked about the weighted vests, and all of these sort of messages that are promoted by people who appear to have these credentials. And the public and book publishers will say, well, MD equals you are a doctor, you are a scientist, and you are qualified to talk about anything health related. And this leads us into some really murky territory.
The MDs, they're running amok. They're interpreting research with highly varying degrees of success. But you asked me to watch something, and I gave it the old college try. Gave it an earnest effort, but I was not capable. Okay, and the reason is, much like you bailed on the Liver King documentary, basically due to disinterest. You asked me to watch a debate between an author / MD / rheumatologist versus a scientist with fairly considerable subject matter expertise on a topic. And it was very, very contentious. It was aggressive. It wasn't over the line. Like it wasn't inappropriately contentious, but it was very contentious. They did not do the typical, like, you'll see, like, I've seen so many of these debates online or on podcasts where it's like people will literally be telling each other, I hate your guts. I hate your family. I want you to die. I hate everything about you. And they'll get in these like online wars back and forth when they're posting. And then they'll get on a podcast and be like, I just love that we can get together and find common ground, even though we have different opinions on the subject matter. It, like, everything smooths out, and it becomes this very like diplomatic, kind of more friendly, let's talk about the topic. This was very contentious, and I grew up in the Midwest, and we don't do confrontation, Lauren. People in the Midwest, we're very polite, and we will avoid confrontation and these types of very brusque exchanges back and forth, very blunt exchanges. We will avoid them at all costs, even if it means saying, you know what, we'll deal with this subject at a later date when it's a little bit safer to do so. So I tried, and the just like general vibes in the room and the contentious nature, I didn't have the stomach for it, Lauren. But why don't you tell us who was involved, what they were debating, and your kind of like big picture takeaways?
So this was on the Dr. Mike podcast. It's the Checkup with Dr. Mike, and I believe he's a general practitioner, but he has quite a popular podcast.
Since there might be some lifting folks listening, this is not Dr. Mike as in Mike Israetel. That's like the shorthand for him.
Right, okay.
Different Dr. Mike. Yeah.
Yes. And he was interviewing Dr. Ali Cohen, who recently released a book. She's a rheumatologist, and she released a book called Detoxify the Everyday Toxins Harming Your Immune System and How to Defend Against Them. And basically, she has this whole program about filtering your water and eating organic foods and looking at your environmental toxins, and how to navigate this world, because in her opinion, all of these environmental toxins are the cause of rising disease. And the other person on the podcast is Dr. Andrea Love, who is a scientist and immunologist in the research space, not a clinician. And her general pushback is, you are kind of misinterpreting the data here, and a lot of the reason why we're seeing more diagnosis of certain diseases is because we're using different diagnostic tools. The more that we're able to diagnose, then it appears that we have more disease, but really it's just a matter of fine-tuning that diagnostic criteria, and capability, right? So they fundamentally disagree. And as you said, it was quite contentious, either direct, loud voices or some really dirty looks, head shaking, smirks.
Accusations.
Some big accusations from Dr. Cohen about, who is Dr. Love working for, to basically she's working for like big chemical.
In the pocket of big chemical, big pharma, etc.
Yeah. So I thought it was interesting because one of the points that Andrea Love brought up was, you as you're an MD, you're a rheumatologist, you are not qualified to interpret the research. You don't understand the science around this. And your attempt to kind of package it into some 5-step, 20-step, whatever it is, program is just a kind of disingenuous attempt to sell books, not a real, not coming from a real place of, I want to help people. And I thought that's an interesting jumping off point, because as I alluded to before, we're seeing this time and time again with this, because you have a certain qualification, sort of giving you this carte blanche. Oh, you can talk about anything health related. And that, again, it leads us down a road where we have people who are confidently spreading information that might not even remotely represent the science, but is presented as such.
Yeah, it's really striking to see this this disparity. You could tell that Andrea has had so many interactions on the internet with people that are so wrong about this topic, that she spent so much time studying, that she just has no patience for it. And I don't know, it's tough. Like I like to believe that a lot of these clinicians who are kind of going way out of their way, way out of their wheelhouse and kind of opining on these topics, I'd like to think that it's generally they're trying to do their best as a person who interacts with folks and is trying to give them good health information. But yeah, it would be, I think, a lot healthier if more of these clinicians just got a lot more comfortable with the humility involved of saying, like Lauren, you're a researcher. You have a tremendous amount of expertise in the topics to which you've dedicated significant time and effort in study. Same is true for me. There are a lot of topics that are really outside my comfort zone. And if I don't have to deal with them, I don't. If I absolutely must, I'll lean on a few people, call in folks, email people who have actual expertise on that, and try to see, like, am I close here? Am I off base? Like, how do I need to adjust my thinking on this? But yeah, I think it is a problem that there are a lot of just kind of like general clinicians who are like, well, if I'm involved in just keeping people healthy, then I guess anything that could, in my mind, impact health falls under the umbrella of my expertise. And we get these books and recommendations that are they're just way off base.
Yeah, and I think if you actually wanted to have a conversation about this and present the information from a clinician's point of view versus a scientist's point of view, and really bring them together in a productive way, then we would be able to do that, or we should be able to do that, but no one seems to. Because as you said, we have certain areas of expertise in the research. I would say having a PhD makes you more equipped to critically read, analyze, interpret, communicate science in general. But of course, if it is in your wheelhouse, you can go an extra step and say, oh, did they measure it this way? Did they use that particular technique? Did they use that statistical analysis? Those are kind of things that are already in your mind when you're reading the paper. Likewise, if you are a clinician, you're realizing what's going on in your practice or things that you're seeing that you can't necessarily explain by the literature. And maybe you have some experience that would lead you to a speculation or a hypothesis based on what you're seeing in your practice. And it's not that one of those is more valuable than the other. It's just that they're very different, and you can't sort of pretend to have one of those expertise when you don't, because as I said, the training is different, the experience is different, the day-to-day is just different. And so the fact that you're a clinician, you're an MD, and you are kind of proclaiming yourself to be able to fill the shoes of the scientist and the dietitian and the exercise physiologist based on your limited but valuable expertise as a clinician with an MD, that's a problem, because it would never fly if we went the other way. And I said, as a researcher who is really familiar with the literature on hormone therapy, email me and I'll prescribe it to you. That would be insane.
Yeah, it's interesting because the licensure, all those kind of legal restrictions pertain to clinical care and certainly not to the dissemination of information. Of course, they shouldn't. Like that's a very dangerous precedent to kind of set, or a dangerous road to go down, I think. But yeah, I think it is really important with some of these. Like I've seen some awful books that have been published by physicians. I was one time, I was dating someone and I found a book. We were like moving some things around, and it was written by an MD, and I just started like flipping through it, and it was nutrition oriented. And it was some of the most outrageous. I wish I had the memory to recall exactly the things that popped out, but like a couple of years after that, I was teaching a course, like a college course on science literacy, and we talked a lot about misinformation and poor science communication. And I was just standing up there with the book, just reading excerpts, because I was like, "You guys aren't going to believe this stuff." And it was in a module for that course where we were talking about how, like, hey, like, credentials have limits. You can't just say like, I'm a doctor, therefore if it's in the health arena, I'm on it and I know it all. So yeah, some of these books get a little rough. What is if you had to pick, what was your favorite moment from this interview with Andrea and Dr. Cohen?
I think it was when Dr. Cohen said, hold on, we need to remember who we work for, because I don't work for anyone. And she was basically accusing Andrea of, as you said, being in the pocket of big chemicals, or making the statement that all chemicals are fine, which she never did. And
Right.
it was just this sort of big misinterpretation of what the other person was saying, and an assumption around what she was saying, instead of actually listening, and then saying, well, you didn't even read my book. And Andrea was like, yeah, I did. Read your book.
Yeah. Yeah, Andrew did not look happy about the whole like implication that she was getting paid off by big chemical companies. And the thing that could be a reality, if if we lived in a different world and people were different and communication was different, is like you were saying earlier, we should be able to get together someone who, has a lot of expertise, perhaps in something like toxicology, or, environmental health exposure research, get them together with a clinician and they kind of share, what are you hearing from patients? Okay, you're hearing that they're worried about this exposure. Here's what you could do to minimize that exposure if indeed it's actually clinically relevant. And then the clinician could say, well, I tell you what, with the clients or with the patients I work with, here are some of the hurdles. That's a big thing that clinicians can bring to the table is what are people experiencing and what solutions or interventions are actually having poor uptake. People are not able or not willing or not tolerating whatever solution is being proposed. So there could be a really valuable, really productive back and forth. But once you start going into outlandish claims that you're dug in on and you cannot backpedal, once you get into, well, there's inherent distrust because I think you're compromised, because of financial, conflicts of interest. Once the conversation starts going in that direction, it gets really messy because some of these topics are like, they do warrant like really legitimate discussion. Like, so for example, here's like me being fair. One of the things that it seems like this Dr. Cohen is big on, or one of the things that at least came up in the podcast was organic food. And I think honestly, organic food, it kind of had its day in the sun, and it's really the research that keeps coming out on it. It just doesn't seem to be all that worthwhile. For insert reason here, like it's just all the promises that people like to kind of lend to it or attribute to it, whether it comes to nutritional content or health related outcomes or environmental factors, it just doesn't really seem to be delivering. And so I thought, that was one area where there was disagreement, and I think the evidence is pretty clear. But, another thing that Dr. Cohen talks about is like using reverse osmosis water filters. And I think something that's worth considering is like, I don't think every person needs to be using a reverse osmosis water filter, but water contamination, poor water quality in many areas is a legitimate concern. Like it's not like some kind of like wacky, crazy idea. Like there are multiple areas of the United States where we have had like known water quality issues in recent years. One of them impacting my state, where there was a bunch of forever chemicals that got dumped into a water source by a factory, and there was a huge cancer cluster. And so like we're still, I mean, like it was a legitimate enough thing that like entire municipal water systems had to retrofit their equipment to do extra filtering because the people consuming that water were exposed to a dangerous chemical for many years. And there were quantifiable health ramifications of that. So I think the thing that sucks about this is a lot of people want to make it, kind of a head-to-head showdown. Sometimes there's ad hominem attacks. Sometimes there's a very reductive, all chemicals are good, or, all chemicals are bad. The reality is, when it comes to managing your exposure to different things in your environment, some stuff is not worth thinking about. Some stuff is kind of bad. Some stuff is really bad. And to the degree to which you can manage your exposure, you really do have to go one by one and figure out, how bad is exposure to this? How much exposure am I actually getting? What can I do to minimize that, if anything? And would it be worth it? So yeah, there could be a lot of very productive conversations about this, but I think, going to the, kind of conspiratorial, you're in this company's pocket, therefore, I mean, the conversation stops being fruitful once you get there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think, as we've talked about with people who are trying to really overcomplicate nutrition and fitness online, I think this is another example of that, where you're trying to sort of complicate someone's life by getting them to worry about a lot of these things that they probably don't need to be worrying about, or spend money on things that they probably don't need to spend money on. And that I don't like, because people are being bombarded with this type of information from so many angles that it just, I mean, your head spins thinking about all the things you're quote unquote supposed to be doing for your health. And that's the issue with a lot of this messaging, and the fact that book publishers really like this angle where what 5 things can you do, or what 10 things can you eat, or what should you absolutely stop doing, this sort of
How many crunches you able to
polarizing.
do?
Sure.
Yeah.
um and it's really not productive. It's not helpful to people. It's the opposite. We have to meet people in a place where we tell them to make changes that are actually important enough to say, hey, focus on this, make this change in your life. And if we do that every single day, at every single turn, with a new thing that you're supposed to dramatically change, or a new thing that you're supposed to purchase, that is going to end up with people focusing on the wrong things, or just sort of ditching health information altogether. And we are seeing that now.
Yeah.
There was an article the other day that came out basically saying half the population has decided that they're no longer listening to experts, and they're going to go with their own intuition and how they feel. That's a problem for a variety of reasons.
You got to go with the gut.
Sure.
Yeah, no, and even to your point, I should add some context. So I've been really on a water filtering kick lately because I've been reading up on a lot of different stuff. And what's really underlying that is the fact that, like, in my opinion, we don't need to be writing popular health books telling people to fear the water they're drinking, but we do need to be educating municipalities and people who actually operate water treatment plants, so that they are doing the type of filtering necessary to deliver safe, clean water to their communities. So I view that as more of a, city or community level thing, rather than like, here's for everyone like a personalized list of things to worry about in your water. Because it's hard to even know in your area what water issues might be of concern. The additional context is that I live out in the country on a private well, so I have to manage my water supply in a thoughtful way. And there's been our water table. There's places kind of northeast of here that have had some radioactive contaminants in the well water, and there's places east that have had a chemical called Gen X that was getting dumped into the water, and now Wilmington out east is having to like refilter everything, and they installed like $50 million worth of carbon filters to try to get rid of that. But all that is to say, like, it generally shouldn't be a you problem, but unfortunately sometimes things slip through. And so I don't think it's the end of the world to educate people on, like, hey, if you want to, really be cautious about filtering your water, here's a way you could do it. But like you said, Lauren, for most people, like, there's much lower hanging fruit for health stuff, right? So finding ways to get people to exercise, eat well, stay hydrated, go to the doctor regularly, don't skip your mammograms. Like that's another thing. Like in fitness, we get so used to we get so stuck on like exercise, nutrition related topics, because of course we do. Of course we should. But like, if you really wanted to like get back to the drawing board, if you were kind of approaching it from a like an actuarial perspective of like, how are we going to help you live long? It's like, don't smoke, don't drink it in excess, don't do drugs, don't engage in highly risky behaviors. Yeah, like there's just go to the doctor every year. Go to the doctor and say, take some of my blood, kick the tires here and see what's going on. Like, even just doing like basic routine screening things is like such a massive deal. So, yeah, MDs writing the books need to find a fun, flashy way to just get people to do their checkup every year or every 6 months, and tell them like, hey, once you're beyond this age, you should also add this every year. Like, that kind of stuff goes so much further than like, oh, you know what? I skipped my last 3 mammograms or my last 3 prostate exams, but like, I switched to organic vegetables. By the way, I never eat vegetables, but on the off chance I do, now I'm going organic. So like, I'm good. Like, it's just such a such an inversion of priorities and such a distortion of what actually matters. And, I think MDs are in a position where they actually they have the authority and the public trust to actually uh,
Affect
alter
change.
and yeah,
Yeah.
and really impact those perspectives. So like you were saying, Lauren, a lot of people are like all the nerds, the scientists who write up all their stupid papers, I'm out. But like I do think that clinicians still have a high level of I don't have any data to back this up, but I suspect that practicing clinicians still have some degree of trust and authority in the eyes of the public relative to like a university researcher. I could be wrong on that, but that's the vibe I get. So yeah, this podcast, even though it wasn't for me because I I cannot deal with I could almost get more on board with passive aggressive. This was just pure good old fashioned aggression, and it was contentious. And I don't think they were out of line. I don't think Andrea was like out of line for how contentious her tone was, but it was certainly not an easy watch, not a like nice chill conversation to be a fly on the wall for. Um,
Yeah, and I wonder if that was off-putting to the audience. I have to say
well,
I hope it wasn't, but maybe it was. It's just, when you talk about something over and over again, and then you get frustrated, and then you kind of forget to remember, oh, maybe this is somebody hearing me for the first time.
yeah, you know what? That reminds me. That's a really good point, and I lack the emotional intelligence to like take a step back and think in that kind of dimension. But I don't think I'm misplacing the memory here. I'm pretty sure this is the instance that it was exactly like that. I remember watching a debate with Stefan Guyenet, who has written a lot of stuff about like the role of the brain in the regulation of appetite and as an extension of that, weight regulation and things like that. And honestly, I think he was writing books that were really ahead of their time. And I think with the rise of GLP-1 medications, he just looks more and more and more correct over time. Like I think he's really sharp. But he had a debate, I think it was on the Joe Rogan show. It was him versus Gary Taubes. And Gary Taubes is like a pretty adamant low carb ketogenic diet kind of advocate. And if that's the debate I'm thinking of, I remember seeing people talking about it where it's like people who actually know the topics were like, yeah, Stefan or Stefan, I forget how he pronounced it. Guillenet is his last name. He crushed Gary. Like, if you're at all interested in like who is a reliable arbiter of the truth, who presented robust and factual information, it was a landslide. But a lot of people who don't know a lot about the topic said that guy who happened to be correct the whole time, but they don't know it, was really dismissive and seemed kind of rude. And there was a backstory. Like Gary, if memory serves, had kind of been an ass to him publicly for quite some time.
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, I think if memory serves, Guillenet was like generally like pretty annoyed with Gary for quite some time leading up to it. And I apologize if I'm retelling the story, but this was like 6 years ago. So it's been ages. And I probably scrambled all my memories, but I do remember some of the chatter being this Gary guy seemed approachable, maybe likable, seemed
Mhm.
like a good storyteller because he's a journalist by trade, not a scientist. And so a lot of people walked away saying like, well, I don't know who's right because I'm not a scientist, but one of them seemed very aggressive and mean, and the other one seemed like a guy I'd like to have tell me stories for a while. And so I think you are correct that you can run into some issues where it's not just the information you present on those kind of platforms, but it's also, are you really winning over people to your cause in terms of your communication style and just the general vibe that you're laying down? And I mean, it, it's tough. Like I think that if you are not really like adamant about like that is a very wrong thing and it's very stupid, sometimes you can, if you don't like lay down the law in that way, you may run the risk of accidentally legitimizing something as if it's like, well, I don't know, maybe that's true. It's very debatable. Like sometimes you do want to say like it's important for you to understand how wrong and unsupported and frankly dumb the thing you just said is. But it's such a fine line to try to navigate, and I couldn't possibly say that I know the right way to balance that. But the good news is, Lauren, nobody's asking me to. So these channels that have like 17 million subscribers, they don't bring me in; they bring Andrea in. So whatever she's doing is working at a high level. So hopefully people saw that, and despite the contentious nature of the discussion, learned a lot from it, and hopefully Andrea gets more opportunities to kind of spread the word, because I do think she does a really nice job communicating science, and not tolerating some of the BS that often flies by unchecked.
And you tell me I'm wrong all the time on this very podcast, even when I'm not wrong.
That is true. Yeah, but it's not quite as contentious here. Wouldn't that be a lovely show if we were just on pins and needles replicating that vibe every single week?
I don't think you're capable of adopting that vibe. I mean, I am. I don't think you are.
No, you are for sure. I do. I feel like you kind of enjoy making people feel uncomfortable sometimes. Is that accurate?
No, that's totally inaccurate. Enjoy making people feel uncomfortable?
You don't think that's accurate?
I enjoy speaking my mind and spreading the truth and calling out the nonsense when I see it. If that makes you feel uncomfortable, then okay.
All right.
I did you a favor. You're welcome.
This is just a nice, polite Midwestern exchange of ideas here.
I'm not from the Midwest.
If you reject the premise, then I accept that. And no, it's I'm glad that that they brought some of those topics to the forefront, and I'm glad that there are very assertive people out there who can engage in that kind of chatter, because that is just not what I'm cut out for, Lauren. I don't know how you do it. You're blowing up on Instagram. Your Instagram's rising star right now. And you tell it how it is, and people like to tell you how they think it is, even though they're generally not correct.
And at least I have this podcast to come on and talk about them behind their back.
Yeah. You get the last word 100% of the time, so it's a great position to be in. All right, Lauren. Anything else for this week's episode, or should we wrap it up here?
The people still want the link to your geriatric pants. Will you give it to them?
Yes, I will do that. If you can tell people what to, I tell you what, I will put it in the show notes. I was going to try to do like 3 things at once. I don't think I'm capable of that at this hour of the evening. But I will put that link. It's a lovely Chinese company that makes just the perfect pant. And actually, I've been wearing a lot of shorts lately because it's 1,000 degrees and humid down here in North Carolina. But tomorrow I have to wear pants because I'm giving a presentation, and I'm going back to the classics. Nice elastic band. Might even put a fake belt in there. Why not? They got the belt loops. Might as well take advantage.
You should get one of those belts that's like a seat belt that just clips in instead of a real belt with a loop.
When I was younger, in my like adolescent years, a big thing that they would do was for like cargo shorts, which were the best. It's the only way to haul actual cargo when you were a young man, was to have cargo shorts, and like you could bring all sorts of stuff with you. But they would sew, instead of having like a full belt that goes 360 degrees around your waist, they would just sew about 1/8 of a belt into both sides of the front of your pants, so you could still kind of cinch them together with this like fake makeshift belt that was literally built into the pants. And like for a long time, it felt like every pair of cargo shorts I got had about, in total, maybe about 1/4 of a belt sewn into it that was actually functional. So we need to bring that back maybe as well with these the geriatric pants.
And more cost effective as well.
Yeah.
You don't lose the belt because it's always attached.
Yeah, you don't lose the belt, and even just from a materials cost, like, why would I have a belt that wraps all the way around? It's so much more material. We just need like 1/8 on the left and 1/8 on the right. So yeah, it was a brilliant design, and unfortunately, a lot of the fashion of the '90s has fallen by the wayside. But it'll it'll be back soon enough, I'm sure.
If anyone sees a crazy headline they'd like us to cover, DM me, Dr. Lauren CS1, or send us an email, frontpagefitnesspodcast@gmail.com.
Awesome. Everyone, thanks so much for joining us, and we will be back in 1 week.